You're listening to the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. The views and opinions expressed on this episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or philosophies of the PFC Entertainment Network or any of the affiliates that make this show possible. This show has also been rated M for mature audiences only.
We don't talk about that.
And welcome back to Sshhhh, We Don't Talk About That. It's Joanna and
Natalie.
And today we're going to talk about when you get triggered and then now what? So, a lot of people know what triggers are. Maybe they don't understand. And a trigger, it really is a very broad definition in reality. It's not always about like something negative, but in this case, we're referring to a mental health trigger.
Yes.
But a trigger is really any stimulus that creates a reaction inside a person's body, sometimes rendering them incapable of controlling their thoughts or actions. It often refers to something that elicits or worsens symptoms, and it's a common experience for people with trauma. So, what can you tell me about triggers?
Well, there are three different types of triggers. You have your external triggers, which is anything outside of your body. So that can be anything in the environment that triggers you in any way, shape, or form. You got your internal ones. So this is anything in your emotions can cause you to kind of spiral. So you're just watching TV or whatever, you start thinking about your grandpa, and now you're spiraling into everything that's ever happened bad in your life, and down the drain you go. And then there's synthetic triggers. So these are like behavioral symptoms. So you're reacting intentionally by bringing these up. So what I mean by that is, let me think of an example. And I had a great example yesterday when I wrote this, but I did not write the example down. So, okay, you're sitting there, you're at a baseball game. Let's go with the baseball game because Jason just mentioned that. Okay. So you're at a baseball game, you're hanging out, you're having a good time with your friends, and all of a sudden you start to think, man, I wonder if my friends hate me. I wonder if they really don't like me. I wonder if I'm only here because I was the last person they could call. And you start to spiral on your own. Nothing internally is triggering you, nothing externally is triggering you, other than you're like, man, I'm having fun. Now I need to ruin it.
Right.
So those are your synthetic triggers. And some of those can be good, like they can be used for good to kind of motivate you or help with creation, things of that nature. But in this case, we're talking about the ones where you just start to spiral for absolutely no reason, which can obviously increase your anxiety, increase your depression, increase your reactions, like all of the things will happen.
I just was telling you, I shared something on our page that was somebody talking about kind of this thing where a guy was saying, like, how do you stay calm when you're triggered and not get reactive? And another guy came in and said, well, I just kind of thought about, like, if I think about somebody else and go, they're thinking this bad thing about me. I have now created this image. I don't know anything. They haven't said anything. They haven't done anything. Nothing's happened. But I have created this false person in my head who I then use to beat myself up and will basically judge what they are thinking about me without finding out the facts of the truth, stories and assumptions, building stories and assumptions. And that was one of the things that I was like, oh, that's that's an interesting way to look at it. But I mean, triggers they can be beneficial because they can tell us things. They can be like a mirror that we can put up and we can see like, oh, you know what? Because it's not that you yelled at me, it's that I didn't feel safe or I didn't feel heard. And you have to get down to that deep core underlying thing. And that's, I wrote in here, I wrote some notes and because for me, triggers are a little intense sometimes. So I liken them to like an electric shock. Okay. And it's, they can be from just dragging your feet on the carpet where you just get the zap and you're like, oh, I don't like that. Or it can be like you got tasered and now I'm on the floor and I'm like, seizing on the floor and I'm crying and it can be over. He snapped at me for something and I'm like, and now I'm the problem and and he's gonna think and he's not gonna love me anymore because I have all this baggage and that external spiral like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yes, there might have been an external trigger, but it wasn't anything that actually fueled that intensity. Mm-hmm. So, the bigger the shock, the less likely I am to be able to control my response. It's no fun. And it took a long time for me not to feel like deep shame over it, to feel like I was broken somehow or less than, because I wasn't able to control myself. I couldn't keep myself calm when somebody said or did this thing. And I'm not saying that I don't still have triggers like, that's not what I'm saying in any way, but it's therapist Dave, like he was telling me something during a full-blown trigger when I was coming down from it and I was going to like an apology mode, which, instead of apologizing when I'm not supposed to now, I say Frankfurter, but I didn't then. So it's just, I'm sorry. So this would have been over and over, Frankfurter. Because I was apologizing for like just crying. And I'd been crumpled on the floor and struggling to breathe a few minutes ago. And it wasn't even EMDR, it was just couples therapy. And I was so ashamed of my loss of control. And Dave said, Joanna, you didn't choose this. This happened to you. It's happening to your body. And it stopped me dead in my tracks because I was like, oh my God, he's right. I didn't want any part of how I was reacting, which was why I had the shame. Otherwise, I'd have been fucking proud of myself that I'd done that. But yeah, I wasn't. And that was because I couldn't understand where that deep root cause was coming from. And I didn't choose it. I didn't have any warning it was coming. I had tools that were new, not well used. They were very stiff. But that moment changed everything for me because we started discussing what triggers are, where they come from, and how to better protect myself from the storm of reaction and use what the trigger was trying to tell me about what was happening. A huge part was, like I said, just stopping to examine it. Like, what's under this trigger? Because typically it's not the thing that you're reacting to, which I didn't get for a long time. You think it is.
To get you to that point. Otherwise, you're like, I keep reacting to the cotton candy, not realizing it's not the cotton candy.
Or that they did this, or they, this person, their actions did this. And yes, it might be not cool what they did, but if I didn't have an underlying deep core value, some kind of value that attaches to that trigger, it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah.
But because I do, somebody can break the rules or be nasty or snap or something like that, and I could get triggered in a way that I just might not give a fuck. Even if it was somebody that was close to me, if I was able to step outside of it and look at it and go like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't about me. This isn't about me. So, and that's what I wrote in here. Because we're not talking about somebody who's screaming in your face and they've triggered you. Like, of course you're going to get triggered. Anybody could get triggered in that, even if you don't have trauma. We're talking about like when my husband and I were together in the bedroom, and I had this experience where the cat was on top of him. She started to hork. She's going to throw up. Keith is like watching his phone. I don't know why he didn't notice it, but he didn't notice it. I didn't realize he had his earbuds in. So I'm like, and he turned around and goes, don't talk to me like that. And I immediately shut down and flooded. And I knew I was 5 years old. I was being told that, I'm the problem from my caregivers, from And I just could not stop the spiral down without taking, like, I had to remove myself. And it took me a few minutes of going, like, I had to go and do a worksheet and stuff, but I had to understand too that trauma can come, or triggers can come from any of your senses.
Yes.
Can trigger you, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, memory, anything.
Day of the week,
Mm-hmm.
time, month,
Yep.
year, like, and anyone has lost anybody, like, you have a grief anniversary when that time comes
I
up.
just went through that with my dad.
Exactly. Like, that's also a trigger, because then your body starts to kind of get anxious.
Here it comes, it's coming up. Oh man.
Like, what's happening? Until you're like, oh, it's because of A, B, or C.
Right. And that doesn't mean that I still won't have reactions, but at least now I'm understanding them better. I know where they're coming from, and I can do more. And that's where I created the first acronym that we're going to use, which was COPE. Right. We've done a podcast on it, so I'm not going to get deep into it. But when I have one of those things, I use COPE. I have to characterize what's happening to me, find out what exactly do I need. Is this a me problem or a them problem? Is this something I need to solve for them? If I can't characterize what I need, then I can at least call out and say, Lord, can you please just help me get calm, or spirit, or whatever, whatever it is that you feel like would be, Grandpa, if you think he's still up there, whatever it is. Can you help me get calm? And by calling that out, your brain, even though you're not necessarily talking to yourself, your brain still hears that message and goes, oh, we're trying to get calm. Okay, and it can start those wheels kind of turning. Yeah. And then I have to open myself up to new ideas and ways of thinking and reacting, because if I want something different, I have to do something different. Then I have to make a plan that I can implement before or during a trigger, and figure out, like, what calms me. What can I assess the situation, which is another acronym that we're going to use, and find possible triggers to avoid. Can I make plans for mindfulness before, after, or during? You can't always plan for triggers, but sometimes, like, I have to go to divorce court and I'm going to see my ex and I'm going to probably get triggered. So let me make these plans so that when these things come up, at least I have some tools at the ready to be able to try and pull out, regardless of how anybody else, I don't give a fuck if anybody gives you shit about, like, calming your body or taking a minute. You deserve that. If you need a minute to calm yourself, you take a fucking minute to calm yourself. Unless you're, like, standing right in front of the judge and they're like, I'm going to rule against you. Maybe
Judge, I need a minute.
Right. Maybe a way to say, but in most cases, if you need to take just, I just got to take a few deep breaths, and somebody's giving you shit, like, don't let that get to you. Just do what you need. And then you have to be able to exonerate yourself, forgiving yourself for what you didn't know, how you made mistakes. If you didn't know better, you couldn't do better. Yeah. And forgiving yourself for people that you may have hurt, even if they're not ready to forgive you. Right? Because forgiveness is a huge gift. That was what I thought of the day was today, because it's a huge gift that you give to yourself. You're the one carrying around the poison, drinking it.
Yeah.
If you are holding on to this bitterness and this anger.
So if you use, like, the example of your cat wanting to vomit in your teeth,
right,
which that just gave me a great image.
It was awesome.
Neither here nor there.
It was awesome.
So if you use that same example, how did COPE help you get through that example?
Well, the first thing I did was I had to stop and go, okay, how old do I feel? What's happening right now? That was my C. I characterized. I feel like I'm 5 years old. I'm being flooded. Make a plan. Okay, I can't function right here, right now, so I'm going to leave the area, which this is part of the SSS too, but I'm going to leave this area, telling Keith what's happening, and I'm going to go do a worksheet. Okay. I've already opened myself up to new ideas by going through. I just started new therapy, so for me, the C and the O are kind of condensed into one. Okay. But people who haven't experienced these, DBT and CBT and CPT and all these different ways that you can pull out tools, then you really have to open yourself up to, maybe I need to, go look at a different worksheet or pull out something that I haven't looked at before, or look at a meditation I've never tried before or something like that.
Okay.
So after that, then I'm making my plan and I'm executing that plan, which is what I need right now is I need 5 minutes to go calm my body down without him around, so the shame will calm down. It's not that I don't want him around. It's that I still have the shame spiral going.
Right.
And if I can just remove myself, there's nobody else around for me to react to, so I can focus on what's happening.
Sure.
And so that's what I do. And then I forgive myself afterwards. After I've gone up and I've spoken to Keith, we always do a repair. It's not like he doesn't ever go off on me. Listeners don't think that he's perfect. He would tell you he's not. That's what he just told me the other day. But he's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man.
Right.
And so he would do he would do the same thing where you come back and you do the repair. You apologize to them, and then you apologize. Like, if you need to apologize to yourself because you feel like, kind of let myself down there, I had better coping skills and I didn't use them, I'm sorry I didn't use that. And I try and talk to little Joanna. And that really will, a lot of times, because it's little Joanna that's being affected. So that's where I'm pulling out of there, and that's where I'm giving myself permission to forgive. Little Joanna's giving adult Joanna permission to forgive herself, and vice versa. And then, like I said, with my partner as well. So that's how I implemented for me having a big reaction. But then there's also assess, which sometimes I need a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I did talk about, like, when I learned these things, it was like being freed from prison.
How long did it take for you to get to this level of understanding once you started therapy?
It took me going through EMDR and DBT. So those two together were about a year and a half. And then let's say I probably would have been, was about 3-4 years between my first therapy with Dave, CBT, talking to him about how, what triggers meant, what boundaries were, how to calm myself, all those things. And then learning new skills and tools beyond the CBT, because taking it to court, it doesn't always work. It's not. So you need other things. And that's where he sent me to EMDR. And then from there, I had a crisis where I should have been made an inpatient, but there were just no beds. Mm-hmm. So I created that outpatient program for myself. And part of that was going through U of M psychiatric program and doing their DBT course. And that really helped me a lot. That was pivotal for me on top of the EMDR. And then everything moved fast. So I think it's finding the therapy that you connect with, that works for you.
Absolutely.
Because it's not that the CBT with Dave, I didn't connect with it or it didn't work for me. It did. But it was much slower than the EMDR and the DBT.
Sure.
They just encompassed such a greater amount of my triggers and the things that I was struggling with, and gave me tools that were more than just, like I said, listing out like, well, this is what the prosecution says. And, you're creating like a whole scenario in your head when you're taking it to court sometimes. And it can get real easy to give the prosecution a lot more evidence than you do the defense. True. There's nobody to protect you. True. So, that was some of the things. But when you heal it with EMDR, then you don't. You get this power back because, you feel like you're being smothered. And then you finally start to be able to take a breath. And I talked about DBT. DBT reminded me of skills that, like, I had these analogies, and I kept thinking about I was on one shore and there's this huge lake across, and I've got to get to the other shore. And all of my caregivers that were supposed to really support me are in boats cross. And as I'm swimming, they're supposed to be helping me get across. And instead, a lot of them are shoving me under, and I can't breathe, and I just can't get a breath. And then finally I figure out that I can get to the other side, and I'm talking to Dave about this, and he goes, or maybe you should have been in the boat all along. And I was like, well, fuck, I should have been in the boat all along. Of course I shouldn't have been swimming the lake by myself. And I definitely shouldn't have been shoved under. But DBT taught me how to separate a lot. Like, that was where I felt like a lot of these, why didn't I learn these things? And then EMDR had already helped me connect with healing a lot of those wounds, even though I might not understand them. I just reprocess them enough that it's like, okay, they're there, but they don't attack me anymore.
Right. Doesn't mean you still don't get triggered, even
Really?
if you are, even if you went through it and have been able to reprocess some of those memories, doesn't mean that magically all the triggers go away.
Even though EMDR is magic, that is not the magic that we're talking about. You're right. And there's a freedom, and you feel this freedom when you start to take a chance on new tools, but there's also a fear. Because when they don't work, then you feel like, oh, I knew it wouldn't work. I'm a failure. See, I'm a fuck up. I'm absolutely. And you can use it to reaffirm, and it can end up being a trigger in and of itself. This thing that you were trying to use to heal yourself. So that's where you have to be able to stop and go, okay, wait a minute. I'm having this big reaction and this outward reaction, or I'm having an internal reaction, but it's big. It's a storm. What is feeding that? What is it that's underneath that is trying to tell me that I'm not safe, or I'm not respected, or I'm not loved, or I'm not wanted, or it's something like that some message you got from 0 to 6 that you've now internalized, and you're kind of projecting it outward in a way.
Yeah.
And you're also receiving that message back from the people that are around you, because you have that message spinning in your head all the time.
Yeah.
Even if it's not actively in front, like your brain still thinks that about itself. So, there's a difference in how you can react to the triggers once you have the tools. It's not that you don't get triggered. It's that the tools are there to help you. So I have an example of, my cat is very old. She has cancer, and she eats this cat food mixed with baby food. It's like a mush. It's a whole process. It's disgusting. And so I'll make a bigger container of it so that we can just pour some into her bowl, because she eats and she eats little bits. If you give her too much, she throws out. It's the whole thing. So I'm down and I'm making this, and I go to put the lid on the thing, and it flips and flings like beef and liver cat food with baby food all over across the kitchen, the dining room. And I was just like, that's exactly what I did. I went, oh, fuck. And then I was just like, time to clean up the cat puke. This is going to be, or the cat food. This is going to be fantastic. I'm going to love every minute as I try not to puke. And then I pulled the garbage can over, and I started cleaning it up. Man, before I learned all these skills, I would have just started crying. It was awful. It got in the carpet. We have these rugs. It got on the rug. It got on the chair. It was everywhere. I would have lost my mind, probably been so loud to get somebody else's attention so that they came and offered me help, versus me being able to verbalize, like, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. It's just amazing. Like you said, it's not that I don't get triggered. It's that the trigger is different. How I respond to it is different. How it interacts with me is different. So it might be the same trigger, but like spiders, I'm terrified of them, or I used to be. But now I'm like, okay, just can you not touch me? Now, if one touched my face, I'd probably lose my mind. But I've had it run across my hand, and I'm like, rude, But before, I was like, I almost set things on fire, getting out like hairspray and a lighter and torch that fucker. I mean, I'm getting it's gonna die. I'm getting insurance. Like something's happening, but
the house is coming down.
It's too big. It was bigger than my thumb. I couldn't handle it.
No, I can't either.
No, that's what I'm talking. Like the over exaggerated reactions really calm down. It's like, it's not just reacting when I get a text, and being able to take the time and view it differently. And if I can't, I can give it fresh eyes too, which I couldn't do before. Like you might get a screenshot that's like, how do I react to, like, not how do I react to this, but this is what I'm feeling. Is this, like, does this match what the situation is? Am I looking at it through a lens that maybe is unhealthy?
Right.
And it's not that it happens all the time, but there are times where I've been like, listen, I just can't process right now. I'm seeing this as I'm the problem. And in reality, somebody's just saying, like, there is a problem.
Right.
you might have been around when they mentioned it or something, and somehow I've internalized it.
Yeah.
So grace for how long it takes to make mistakes, and how long it takes, and the mistakes along the way. Like that is super important too as you're learning this, and just remembering that your intention is really more important than your results.
Yeah.
Because results are great, but results are something that happens and then typically they're over. But an intention, if you keep that intention, it continues. So even if you fail, you still got the intention, or you stumble or you fall, you still got the intention to keep going. And that's what keeps you getting up and moving forward. That's what keeps me, is that I know that I am always actively working to be the best version of myself that I can be. It doesn't mean that I succeed.
No, you're gonna trip and fall.
Yes.
Because everybody trips and falls.
Right. And I have maybe a few more hurdles in my lane than other people might have.
Fair.
But also I have things that I can get over and accomplish that other people just struggle with.
Yeah.
Because of my own experiences and learning how to process things, and even learning all of these skills and tools. Just because I get attacked by triggers sometimes doesn't mean that like this wasn't incredibly valuable even without that. If you take that out, just what I learned was so valuable. And then when I model that, people around me either start to model it themselves, or the wrong people gravitate away, the right people gravitate towards. Your circle starts to change because you're just vibrating on a different energy level. And then before you know it, like triggers are less, because you're not in environments where where that's going to happen. You're going to get triggered. In addition to, I can deal with it. And the people that are around you, like it all just kind of shapes together. When you're a trauma patient, I think it's hard for us to remember that we can slip back at any time. It can attack it because that trauma is buried so deep in your cells, in your brain, in your cellular level. And even when you're using your EMDR, like there are things that have triggered me right through my EMDR. Now, I didn't have the same huge reaction, but it was still something that I was like, oh, I thought that was all packed away from the EMDR, but definitely came out and smacked me there. And then I was able to put it away again, versus like it just being spilled all over the floor. And I'm like, oh, the pages are everywhere. How am I going to put it back together? I got to shove it in this box, stick it in the corner. So one thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if this is something you're aware of, it's that like you, when we were growing up, were more boisterous.
I was never boisterous.
Boisterous?
Does not describe me at all.
Maybe a bit reactive. And was it the military that curbed that for you, or was it your schooling and your training? Was it both? I mean, because for me, I went a long time where I just was very reactive, very reactive, very reactive, very reactive. And then as I got older, all of a sudden I learned these new things and started to implement. And some of it because you have these shifts, you just become completely different than you were even the day before, especially with EMDR.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my new EMDR therapist is like, it's like wizardry. And I said, we were saying it's magic. So for you, what was that journey?
I think boisterous is still there.
It is, but
it's matured.
Yes.
I would say it's matured.
Yes.
The reactivity, obviously leaving home, period, like took away a lot of the triggers that I had.
Right. That makes sense.
I didn't know that I had triggers.
Right.
So being gone helped with that a lot. And then it becomes a different environment because I have to go through basic training and all of the things. So I think that was like the biggest piece. And then whenever I would come back home, whether I was on leave or in between schools or whatnot, I would be excited initially. Like, oh, I'm going to come home. I'm going to see my parents. It's going to be great. But like the entire time, like leading up to coming home, the entire time I was at home, like I didn't realize then, years later, like I was able to see like the panic and anxiety, like just growing in me because I never knew what I was going to see when I got home, if I was going to come in contact with certain people when I was home. Like I had no idea.
Right.
And even until, bullshit, till I moved home, I'd probably been here. I moved back home. I'd probably been here a good, probably 6 months before I was like, you are fucking 48 years old. You can go and do what you want. You do not need your father's permission.
Right.
But up until then, it was like, well, I need to make sure my dad's okay with this.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that, like, is he going to get mad at me if I'm out too late? I've been a grown-ass adult and have grown-ass adult children. But that was just because of that panic and anxiety of like what could happen, what was going to happen.
Right.
But then as soon as I would leave, I would be sad because I would be leaving my family, but like immediately, like all the panic and anxiety just disappeared. But I didn't realize what that was.
Right.
As far as everything else, when I reacted to things, like I just buried it because it's what we do.
Right.
Buried it nice down deep, or so I thought.
Yeah.
But like every time I was in a relationship, like it would rear its ugly head, and then I bury it, and then a new relation, rear it again, and then I bury it, and like that became my pattern. Once I went through school, and then started working with clients and things of that nature, it made it so many more things connected. So it was like, oh, the thing I just told you about, I do that. Why do I do that? So like being a therapist for people and going through the training itself was super helpful in helping me really understand myself even more.
Right.
And then when I did my own therapy, it was like, oh, now I get it. But I mean, it's still a process.
Right.
Like it's still a process. But I think those things helped in a lot of ways where now I'm able to sit back. My parents are Trump supporters. It's okay if you support Trump out there in podcast land. It's okay. I am not a Trump supporter.
Right.
Do I agree he did good things for the country? Yes, I do. But I also know. So now, like, if my parents or their friends sit around and they start talking about Trump or the state of the nation, and then all of a sudden now everything's wrong with the Democrats. Again, I'm not a Democrat. But like they start having these conversations and I just sit there and I'm like, it's not even worth my time. Like, I'm not going to argue. If you're going to ask my opinion, I may or may not give it, depending on the temperature in the room. Where like 20 years ago, I'm giving you all the opinions, and my opinion is the best opinion. Therefore, you should listen to me because I will be the loudest MFer in the room. Be all aggressive.
Right.
Not like physically aggressive, because I'm scared to fight people. Which is counterintuitive to being in the military. But so even that, like I can sit and have those conversations with people. And I'm sorry. We're so cute. So yeah, things have gotten a lot better in that aspect, and being able to, the self-talk is huge. Because that's a big thing. Because like you mentioned, there's different things that can trigger you. And like our most important sense is our olfactory sense, our sense of smell.
Right.
So you can walk into anywhere and you can smell oranges, and all of a sudden that orange smell takes you back to a time when you were picking oranges with your grandma. I never did that. That's just an example. Or I can walk into literally any bakery or like around the bakery, like Myers or Walmart or whatever. And like all of that sugary smell takes me back to my mom making candy in the kitchen. And my mom hasn't made like candy in years, but I'm like, I can see all the like little candy molds and things of that nature. So it connects to us a lot faster.
Right.
So if we smell something negative in the air that smells like a perpetrator, a fire we were involved in, oil from a car accident, like literally gunpowder rather. Any of that can immediately, take us right back to where we were at that time frame, and then our body's like, we're in danger.
Yep.
So our body starts to freak out.
Yeah, because you have, we talked before, like you have emotional brain and you have rational brain, and you're trying to get to wise mind.
Yes.
And emotional brain is having this big freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And rational brain is like, well, listen, we're just going to do these other things, and we'll just set all that up. We're going to cut them off, and then we'll protect you. Right. We just won't ever speak to them again. They've hurt you, and we're just that's it. They're dead to you.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And then it takes you being able to go, well, wait a minute. Why am I reacting in emotional brain and rational brain? What is it that you actually are saying that I need protection? I'm not feeling safe.
Right.
And then putting those two together gets you into wise mind, where you're like, okay, when somebody screams in my vicinity in an angry way or shouts, if I'm watching a show and somebody's like shouting at me in some way, and I internalize it that way, or they're big up in front of me, those things I know will cause a storm reaction to my body.
Yeah.
Now I'm better about, like, self-talk is one of the biggest things that we've talked about, because nobody talks to you more than you do. Nobody has more thoughts, more input, more judgment, more anything about you
than yourself. Yeah.
Yes. So the more that you can curb those thoughts to curiosity, to exploration, and to positivity, the more that your brain is going to lead away from the negative self-talk, lead away from the negative behaviors, and start getting curious. Why am I behaving this way? What's underneath it? Okay, I don't feel safe. What can I do to make sure I feel safe? Because it's not your job to make sure I feel safe.
Right.
It's my job to make sure I feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe as a partnership, we've agreed, like, we're best friends. You're not going to scream at me. But you're my husband. We're not going, you're not going to belittle me. You're not going to shout at me. You're not going to talk to me. I'm not going to throw things. I'm not going to do. And some of this is stuff that people actually have to go be like, look, that's not a behavior that I really appreciate. Can we find a way to move away from that? You have to be able to articulate it to your partner, to your friend, whatever, what your needs are, because that is also your responsibility.
Yeah. And it's hard for a lot of people to understand that, because a lot of people, and I've had clients that have come in and been like, I just keep getting triggered. And
they triggered me.
They're triggering me, and I can't manage this, and they need to stop. So then it becomes less about you managing your own triggers.
You have no control.
Them managing your triggers for you.
Right.
So then it becomes a different conversation of, like, if you get triggered, how is your partner supposed to know, or your best friend, your mom, whatever, just know that they're triggering you? Well, they should just know. Okay, well, do you just know what your mom wants for her next Christmas gift? Or do you just know what your husband wants for dinner tomorrow? Like, you can't just know. You need to be told things. So if they don't know they're triggering you, how can we have a conversation about what that looks like? How can we practice that? And then how can you make sure that you're taking care of yourself, so when you are triggered, you are not reacting?
Right, that you're not spilling it back on them.
Yes.
Because it's okay to have a reaction. It's totally okay to have a big reaction. What's not okay is for you to hold other people hostage with your reaction.
Right.
And that's not something that is ever done intentionally. Nobody ever notices or realizes that that's what they're doing. But, like, if you're a screamer and that's how you react, and you get upset and you start shouting because you're fucking pissed off, and you're going to start screaming about this and that and the other thing. And there's somebody in my life that does this. And I have to remind them, like, not only are you large, but when you send out that energy, it sends out danger messages. It sends out, and it causes me to shut down and react.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you that that's what's happening.
Right.
You may not realize it, because that's your that you think it's normal.
Yeah.
That's your reaction. You may not realize, and some people may not get triggered by that. Some people are like, yeah, that's how you talk. That's how you communicate. I know people that's how they work out their fights. They shout it out, and then they come to an agreement at the end, and then they hug and kiss and make up, and they move on with their lives. I could never have that relationship, but it works for them.
Right.
That's what they do. Now, I'm not saying that that's a healthy way to do it. I'm just saying, like, people find ways to work around these things, but you have to be able to, they had to communicate with each other. Like, this is what I can handle. This is what I can't. When I need space, I've got to go. Sometimes they've got to text. They work around it because they trigger each other.
Yes.
With that behavior. And it's not something they're really able to remove from their vocabulary.
Right.
And not everybody is. You're not going to be able to remove every trigger. You're not going to be able to control every response. And setting that bar for yourself, you are setting yourself up for failure, not failure in a good way.
Yeah.
Because you have to be prepared to fail when you're learning any of these new skills.
Sure.
But you're setting yourself up like for failure where there's no success possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to figure out, like, okay, this triggers me. How can I react to it? And how does that affect the relationship that I'm talking about or thinking about or whatever? Is that relationship important to me? If it is, then I'm going to want to set boundaries for them and make sure that they know how I want to be treated. Because that's what boundaries do. You're not going to be like, listen, Jason, you better never, ever, ever be nasty to me or talk in a sharp voice to me, or you and I are going to have a fucking problem. That's not how you handle it. Right. Like, that would go well with Jason. I know. Jason would be like, all right, hang on, let me get these gloves. We got to fight. But it's not something that you, and I couldn't do that to you either. Like, Natalie, I don't need you raising your voice at me or using any kind of jokes, teasing me about this or that. You have to go and be able to articulate it in a way that the person wants to hear your message.
Mm-hmm.
That they're able to hear you right in here. Not that that was anything that I needed to say to Jason. I would talk to him or him, but you guys were right there to use this example. So there you go. But I experience this a lot with my family. That's where I experience it, my relatives. And I really have to work on, because I've changed so much too, what my needs are, and now they're still reacting, expecting me to react a certain way sometimes. And I'm like, whoa, you don't have to tell me every detail of that anymore. I don't control that way anymore. I've been able to let a lot of stuff go. It's hard for people to learn that you change and you mold. It's hard for you to learn how to do it, but the benefit, the freedom, the experience that you get when you finally are able to take that first real breath of, like, the anxiety's lost its grip. I reacted in a way that I'm proud of. I handled that well. I normally wouldn't have handled that well before, and I really did this time. And I am just so pleased with all the work that I've done and where it's gotten me to. You may not have that linear of a thought process, but no, I did. And I was just like, man, and I took a moment to say, good job, Joanna. And that's not stuff that I would have done previously before. I would have blamed myself for having that trigger, or blame the person for triggering me instead of owning them. And it's not as easy as it sounds, but when you are reacting to somebody, it is always about something that's going on inside you. Even if they're shouting at you, it's still like you don't feel safe. You've experienced it, you don't feel safe, whether it's a experience you've had before or this is the first time you've ever been screamed at by somebody. But it's still that core, like, safety, value, love, empathy, acceptance, those kinds of things. If you're not experiencing those from people, that's what can cause you to have a lot of triggers. And far easier to control your own reaction than to try and control somebody else's behavior towards you.
Yeah, which is damn near impossible.
Right.
Because you can't control somebody else. You can only control yourself.
You can ask. You can ask for them to work on things.
And they may or may not do it.
And you're absolutely right. And then you can get frustrated about it, and you can throw a fit and get all mad, and they're not even trying, and they're still going to upset me. If you deal with that trigger, like, you're able to take control of your life. And unfortunately, sometimes maybe you move on from people because they're not willing to do the work. Absolutely. They're willing to grow with you. But if it's right, then people will grow with you. Might be a little slower, might take a little longer, but they will do what's needed to keep you in their life, just like you are. So yeah, that's my thoughts on triggers. You got anything else you want to input there, Chickadee?
And obviously we've been talking about a lot of things over the past 11 episodes that we've been here for. Past 11, this is number 11. Math. See math. We've talked about a lot of things, and everything is like another baby step.
Yep.
Like you're taking another baby step.
Yep.
You're learning something different. And once you realize kind of how your triggers make you feel when they happen, and you understand kind of, okay, what are my external triggers? What are my internal triggers? Like, what are even my synthetic triggers that I'm like intentionally triggering myself with? What are those things, and why are they impact? Being able to break it down, kind of looking underneath it at the bottom for what it's doing to you. And then, okay, now how can I make sure that next time I react differently? Because the more I understand about the problem, the easier it is for me to then, wouldn't say fix, but course correct the problem.
Right.
Sometimes you can fix it, sometimes you can't. But the more you know about something, the less scary it becomes.
Correct.
So the more I understand my triggers, the less scary my triggers become, which is huge. And when we're dealing with, so for me, for the job,
She did air quotes there.
I did air quotes there. You're welcome, Gemini. For the job, if I had, well, pretty much every client I've worked with has had some sort of traumatic something. So I'm a trauma specialist, so they come to me for trauma-related things. And so we talk a lot about their triggers and about plans for what happens. Because some people's triggers will cause them to go into a full-blown crisis mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can
I love
be,
that.
the acting out can be like way worse. Now, maybe there's cutting in order to kind of make their body feel something different. Maybe they're using substances, maybe they're gambling, maybe they're whatever it is.
Right.
Maybe they're like hiding underneath their bed or in a closet, just freaking out, rocking, crying, screaming, can't stop. So as a therapist, we create basically crisis response plans or crisis plans to kind of help manage what those triggers are. And like an element of it is, what are my triggers?
Mm-hmm.
What triggers me? What should I stay away from?
Mm-hmm.
What should I make sure that I carry with me? Who are the people I can reach out to when I'm triggered for certain things?
Right.
Some people will call their mom when they're triggered for this. Some people will call their brother when they're triggered for this. Some people will be like, I can't talk to any of them, so I'm going to call the crisis hotline, which is great because any of the hotlines, like, it's really anonymous unless you're making a suicidal or homicidal statement. So don't do those unless you actually need that sort of help, because then they will help you in that way. But being able to reach out to somebody outside of yourself to allow you to calm down in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of that's helpful. Some people need to go directly to the hospital. They need to call 911. Like, having a plan for as many things as you can come up with is ideal. Kind of like everybody's taken some sort of class, whether it's in middle school, high school, college. I don't feel like we had syllabi in elementary school, but your course syllabi like breaks everything down and outlines like everything you're going to do for the class. Here's your goals for the class, and then here's what you should learn in the class, and here's how we're going to get from like A to Z. So essentially, it's the same thing. Like, here's all the goals that you want to have and how you want to react to things. Here's what you want the end result to be like. So now how do we get you from A to Z when all of these kind of elements take place?
Right.
Just in order to kind of maintain our own balance, our own homeostasis,
Mm-hmm.
In order to keep us as in control of us as we can, because nobody's going to do that for us.
Nope.
Doesn't matter. Nobody's going to do that for us.
Well, they can't.
No.
I mean, you can meditate to suppress behaviors and things like that, but you are not dealing with the underlying issue.
No.
You are literally only depressing and suppressing down whatever it is that is the underlying issue by medicating the person so they don't feel it, or so they don't care, depending on what type of medication they get. And it doesn't solve the underlying problem.
No.
And that's been part of what has been kind of the argument with some, like Vanderkolk. He doesn't, although he understands some people need stimulants and stuff, he really feels like they're overprescribed, and antidepressants are very much overprescribed.
Yeah.
Because we aren't sending people to therapy. We've talked about this before. Like, it'd be great if we would assess people, send them for an assessment, and find out, like, hey, is there actually a therapy that might work for you better than introducing a chemical that is just going to make you not care that your dad died, or that, your house burned down, or whatever. Maybe we can deal with the underlying feelings of loss or grief or sadness or, whatever it is. That is it's far more reaching. It has more longevity, and it can help you with so many other different aspects of your life versus a medication. It might help, they're just throwing darts at a wall, hoping that they hit the bullet board with those medications. They know they affect the brain. They don't really know how. They don't know what it's actually doing in there. They're just like, oh, well, this makes them calmer. So,
and if you're depressed or you're anxious and it's more circumstantial, like you're depressed because your dad died.
Right.
And it's not because you actually have a lack of chemicals in your brain.
Right.
Then what's the long-term damage that can cause?
Right.
Like, situational means it's not going to last forever.
Right.
But if you have the tools in your tool bag in order to help you get through it without taking medication, or if you are taking medication, being able to then get off of it.
Right.
But if, because medications are fantastic for people that desperately need them, which there are so many that absolutely need them. But if there's another way, a better way, or a healthier way for you to learn different ways to manage things rather than taking a pill every day, maybe we try that. Although it sometimes can be scarier. It can be a lot of hard work.
It can take longer.
It can take a little bit longer, and it's not nearly as much fun as numbing. But in the end, it's whatever's impacting you is always going to be there to impact you.
Right.
So at some point, you need to start dealing with whatever that is, so you don't carry it with you.
Because then you get the control back versus you being attacked. You have no control over when you're going to have it react and where you're going to have it react. And you at least get a little bit more, if not full. I mean, there are sometimes where you can heal triggers fully, and then it's like, that doesn't trigger me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just super empowered. But even just 10% more control is better than nothing. It all, and it builds up. It's, you have a little, that worked a little bit this time. Okay, well, let's try it again. Well, we're a little better. And then you try it again. Oh, it didn't work as well this time. That's one of those baby steps, like we talk about, the back step here, a side step there. It doesn't mean you give up. You try it again. You keep implementing. Mm-hmm. Eventually, though, like any muscle that you keep using, it's going to get stronger. It's going to get easier to use it. You're going to be able to do more things. And then you'll be able to expand to other things if you want to, like I did. I mean, when I first started therapy, I could have never guessed that I would end up wanting to do a podcast about it.
No,
and talk about my experiences and get kind of in depth with how wacko I can be sometimes. But I have come so far, and looking back, I am so proud of the journey that I have made. And I want other people to be inspired enough to at least think maybe it's possible for them to. Even if they can't be like, I can do that too. Maybe. Maybe's good enough for me.
Maybe, absolutely. Maybe we'll get you in the door. Maybe we'll have you pick up the phone.
Yep.
Maybe we'll have you Google search something.
Yep.
Maybe we'll have you asking questions that something might have a chance of being different if I just tried something different.
That's right. That's right.
Because nothing's going to change if nothing changes.
That's right. So,
which is crazy.
That's where we're at with triggers, and that's how we understand them, and how the best ways that we know of to be able to handle them and not let them control your life, control all of your feelings and your outcomes and your reactions.
Yeah, I was just talking with a new client, asking like, well, how do you manage? How do you manage your stuff? Because some people don't like the word triggers. So it depends on what word clients like. So I'm like, how do you manage your stuff? He's like, I run, I work out. He's like 5, 6, 7 days a week. He's like, if my head starts spinning, he's like, I got to go on a run. He's like, because when I'm on a run, nothing, like nothing I can hear nothing. I can see nothing else going on but the road, the music, and my breathing. He's like, so it helps me calm everything down. And when I get done with the run, then I kind of just go back to what I'm doing. So I had asked him, I said, so do you ever go back and kind of address what caused you to go wrong in the first place? And he's like, well, like the stuff did, like my anger did, my whatever did. And I'm like, so let's go back and talk about that. But why? But I ran, so it fixed it. I'm like, the run didn't fix it. The run got you out of your head and body long enough for you to calm down. Now we want to circle back and work on why we had to get to the run point. And like, he looks at me like, why would I want to do that? Because then it'll piss me off all over again. I'm like, but it won't. Right. It might, but it probably won't.
So we're going to handle it. We're
we're learning different ways. Not saying you can't run every time you get upset, because absolutely you can run every time you get upset. But if we're understanding why we're running and what the point is of the running is, and how to stop us not from running, but for running so that we're running for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. Because eventually, like, you still have to circle back, because that shit is still going to be there, because then it just pissed you off 2 weeks later.
Right. Well, and once I learned like what my triggers were, I don't know if I even finished going over the assess acronym because we got so in depth with our talking. But you know, I'm able to implement these steps so quickly and easily now because they're so simple. So it kind of is like what you're talking about, like get what attention, like what is trying to get my attention? You're talking, what is the underlying thing that's happening here? And what is my body trying to say with my emotions? Because my emotions are my messengers and they're trying to give me a message. Yes. So I need to slow down my thoughts, my actions, and especially my responses. And I have to take a breath. And then I need to scan myself and be like, okay, so where in my body am I feeling this? Or what is little Joanna actually saying? Right. Like I understand that I'm triggered and I've got this, but what is the actual message? And how old do I feel while this is happening? I have to eliminate any outside influences. Turn off the TV, get away from whatever's triggering me, go outside, get by myself or get with a person, someone who I trust that will help support me through it, but also not let me gaslight myself or change the narrative of the problem. Somebody that will tell me the truth and keep me on that path. And then I have to ask again, drop the story. Drop whatever it is, that unhealthy or unhelpful assumption or story that I've attached to the feeling or the situation, and check again to see, is this a me problem or is this a them problem? And then I have to, at the end, stop making excuses for my own poor behavior, my own lack of being able to set boundaries, for not eliminating negative influences in my life, if that's what it was. If that is needed at that point, I need to be like, if I'm constantly hanging out with somebody that triggers me, and it's because they're completely misogynistic, for instance, right. and I'm never going to get through to them, but I keep hanging out with them because I don't know, I've known them for a really long time, and I don't have a good person I'm thinking of with this, but if I keep doing that, I'm the one who's continuing to expose myself. I have not set the boundaries. I am not removing myself from something that I know is triggering me. So it's time for me to stop making excuses that it's their fault and recognize that I'm still going. Like, they could be on the dance floor. I don't have to dance. I'm choosing to dance.
Yes.
I could walk around them, go to the other side of the dance floor and be like,
Yeah.
So that's how assess helps me in the moment. And I really appreciate that I've been able to create these two acronyms and use them together. I hope other people will get something from them. They may not carry on like, cope and assess, but
I think they're great though.
That's what I do, is I cope, and then I assess and cope, but in the opposite, because cope is really more broad, and then assess is like, okay, let's get down to the brass tacks. What's actually happening deep inside? What are we going to do about it? How are we going to handle it? And how are we going to take ownership?
Yeah,
absolutely. So that I'm back in the driver's seat. I'm in control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the psychos on the back of the bus driving. The ones that tell me that I'm dumb or I'm fat or I'm ugly or whatever.
They're so annoying.
So, but sometimes they get real loud, and you know.
Yep.
So that's. I think that we've given a pretty good broad context of what triggers are, how to help manage them. Whether that's going to be that you're going to find, journaling, meditation, breathing techniques, installing a scent, an aroma that you calm yourself down with, going to a different type of therapy or modality, working with a friend. There's so many different skills and tools that you can use, things that you wouldn't even realize, like get a fidget spinner if you need one.
Yeah.
Get that to distract yourself. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So I think that if people can take the time to slow down and maybe assess their triggers, they might have a lot easier time coping with all of the shit that life and society throws at us every single day that are out of our control.
You want to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And stop blaming others.
Yeah. That's the biggest.
It's hard.
It's hard. That's why it's the last one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the hardest one for me. It was the biggest one where I had, it's really hard to accept responsibility and be like, I'm the one who's freaking out about this. I am the one who is making a big deal about this. It may not even be a big deal, really, if I could just step back and calm down. But it's triggered something in me that it's made it a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, Jason.
Hi.
Yeah, I saw you spit out some coffee or something there for a minute.
Listen,
drinking.
I need you to be more aware of what I'm doing when you decide to drop a joke in there. Make sure I'm not mid swallow before shit starts just flying out of places that it shouldn't be flying out of. Be that as it may. Couple of things here, Natalie. I have a question.
Yes.
For you. You broke down the 3 types of triggers here: external, internal, and synthetic. When I heard you break down synthetic, is this where self-sabotage would come into play?
Yes.
Okay. Because
yes.
This is an instance that I have been exposed to, in which, and as soon as you started going down this, I'm like, a particular face popped up in my mind, and I'm like, son of a bitch. This is what their particular trigger is. So I wanted to make sure that I was on the same page here, and I wasn't reading more into it than what there really was. So thank you for that.
I want to say, I think that, and it's important you brought those up, but synthetic ones are the ones that are the most difficult to realize.
Yes.
That you are creating the trigger, that it's happening, that there is a trigger indeed involved.
Yeah.
Because you just think like, this is just how it is. These are my thoughts.
Right.
And, thoughts are threats, but they're not. So anyway, yeah, go on.
No, I just wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand.
You definitely did not.
Okay. Well, love that for me. Moving on from people. Joanna, you made mention of this, and this is something that I dialed in on because as I have embarked on a lot of my own personal change and growth and things of this nature, it's almost become, it's not a gimmick at this point. It's just what I have absolute zero problem in severing the ties. Like sight unseen. I do not give a fuck at this point because whatever that individual represents threatens my inner peace. And they have triggered one thing or another, or either accidentally or in a lot of cases maliciously. You know what I mean? Like they know what they're doing. They know what buttons that they're pushing. And I'm like, absolutely not are you going to have that kind of power, for the lack of a better term, or I am not going to be your puppet. You are
Right.
not my puppet master, and I will cut them sons of bitches off without a second of hesitation. And a lot of people don't like doing that because there's so much time involved. There's all this history. There's this or that, which I understand that. And if you need to take a minute to actually process what this person is to you or what they had been to you, do they have the capability to still fill that role in your life? If you question any part of that, if I question any part of that, I do not give it a second thought because I have a limited amount of time here, and I'm not fucking around. I'm just not doing it. The other thing here is be proud of your journey, which that really stood out to me because it's your story. And everything that you are enduring adds a layer to that story. Our lives are our own stories. We write our own scripts for the majority of what happens to us. There's a lot of outside influences, but at the same time, you need to be proud of what you're doing, how far you've come, and you need to take that time to recognize that, to inspire you to be like, okay, I went through some shit at this point, and I've got some more on the horizon, but I have proven that I can do it. And we need to be reminded of that from time to time, either internally or it needs to be recognized, all depending on what is going to resonate with you more. Because a lot of people, like you, they will be more internal about this. I am proud of where I have come from. But there's other people that need that acknowledgement. They need it fills a void in some layers in their ego and their way of just dealing with the world. They need to know, they need to be validated, like I'm doing the right thing. And I can understand that. I've had conversations with other people about this. And the last thing I'll mention here, and this was huge. And I know, and I'm going to send this episode to a few of my friends that I work with because I feel like this is going to resonate. Stop blaming others and accept responsibility. And there's nothing wrong with accepting responsibility if you're willing to acknowledge what's going on and you're willing to put the effort in to correct your course of action. Yes, the world is fucked up right now, but it is not the sole reason why you are dealing with your particular situation. If we're being honest, if we're having honest conversations with ourselves, where could I have improved on this? What could I have said or done that would have taken this particular situation in a different avenue, instead of it being a volatile, instead of it coming out on the other side with a lot of ill feelings? How could I have done this in a better, more productive way? Accepting responsibility is what I would assume step one. Once you are accountable for your own actions, then chances are pretty good you are going to have a better outlook and better outcome the next time this rolls around. And those were the things that resonated with me this week.
Very cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Well, as always, another great episode, ladies.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thought that was pretty productive. So it'll be interesting when we listen back if I sound like a rabbit chasing chasing a butterfly through a field or something. I'm gonna catch it because I'm off on a tangent. I don't know. We'll see.
It was great.
We'll see. We'll see. It's all good. But
Well, here's what I do know. What you guys are doing is resonating. It's resonating with your listeners. You're attracting new traffic to the Facebook page. So, I mean, you're obviously doing something right.
right.
We build upon that.
Absolutely.
And if anybody has any questions or comments for either one of these two ladies, you can reach them via direct message on the We Don't Talk About That Facebook page. Or you can
Mhm.
go to pfcnetwork.net. All of their contact information is going to be on there. Just look for their particular show page. Anything else before we put a bow on this?
I don't think so. I mean, people should remember that triggers are temporary and that it's going to pass. So, and no matter what you're feeling, like just take some deep breaths. And even if you can't elegantly get through it, you will get through it.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. And then when you're calmed down, maybe look at it again and go, okay, what do I need to do so that that doesn't happen again?
Mhm.
So, other than that, I think we've pretty much sent our message.
All right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and put a bow on this episode. We appreciate everybody tuning in, either via the podcast feed or on our YouTube channel. Go out, be awesome to yourselves and to each other, and we'll see you next time right here on Shh. We don't talk about that here on the PFC Entertainment Network.